The Federal Reserve, the Fed, has finally spoken up. They say that the McCallister's from Home Alone were in fact 1%ers, judging by the size of their house.
This is because of all the memes about Home Alone from all this month.
Yep.
And people wondering what the hell did Kevin's dad do for a living to afford that, plus a whole family vacation to Paris.
He didn't pay for the vacation. The uncle paid for the vacation.
Well, what did the uncle do for a living that he could afford that?
They were probably, well, I think they point out that the guy who plays the dad in Home Alone ends up being like a money launderer on Breaking Bad.
Okay.
So, he was laundering money for a cartel.
But that's just a theory, a film theory.
So it says it's been 33 years since Home Alone hit theaters, and decades on, fans still have a few lingering questions. Could Kevin's family really not realize that they were missing an entire child? How did the wet bandits survive all the wild traps that Kevin sent their way? And what on earth did the McCallisters do to afford such a lavish home and a pricey Christmas trip to Paris?
Well, the movie came out in like 1991, so
Yes.
Mr. McCallister was probably like owned a small mechanic shop.
No. He's a lawyer, right? Back in the
he worked at Baskin Robbins.
Not owned, worked at.
He eventually franchised one and bought an even bigger house.
That guy had a salary of $30K a year, bought that giant house, and is currently looking at his grandkids going, well, in my day, we simply worked for it.
Yes, and the kids are like, wow, which one of us is going to inherit the house? And he's not. He's going to sell it right before he dies.
Yeah.
And then give the money to
He's gonna go on a
charity.
cruise.
Exactly.
He's not going to give the money to his kids. He's going to be like Guy Fieri saying, like, sorry, my kids need 2 degrees if they're going to get my millions of dollars.
Jeez.
It says they attempted to answer the question, conducting a deep dive into the McCallister's family finances. I wish somebody needs to make fake financial forms and add seals from the movie studio on there and be like, it was deep lore into the script that Mr. McCallister had these forms lying around.
So the Fed says the McCallisters were part of the 1%. According to the numbers, Peter and Kate McCallister would have needed to earn at least $305,000 annually in 1990, which would be $665,000 in 2022 to afford that house.
So he was a doctor or a lawyer, probably employed a lot of people, had an affair with his secretary.
Zillow estimate would price the house today at $2.4 million.
Jeez.
The best part is he should be like, this was my starter home.
I don't even get it. I will say, not directly related to the film, why do people buy houses like this? I would want more land and less house.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was different. Back then, the suburban lifestyle was ideal. It was considered the ideal back at this time period. You wanted the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids and the dog in the yard.
Well, it still is considered the ideal by most people.
I guess in this sphere here, land is starting to become what people consider actually valuable rather than the property.
I don't want land.
You want land?
I want land.
What am I going to do with it?
She's like, you only garden so much.
Lord over it.
That's it. It's just for the feeling.
Yeah.
You go out on your deck every day with your cup of coffee and you look over your land.
I feel like this may be one of those things that's just appealing to the male fantasy.
Yeah, it's definitely a male-brained thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. You could get some serfs.
Also, they say what the McCallisters do for work. Do we really believe that Mrs. McCallister was working? This was a single income household.
His mom was a fashion designer.
No, she wasn't. She wore a frumpy coat the whole movie.
That was fashionable back then.
It was the 90s.
It was, okay, so the only reason she would have wore that coat is because Scully wore one on the X-Files. And I don't know if this actually came out at the same time.
She did kind of remind me of Scully.
Yeah, she does, because she's got the red hair, just like Gillian Anderson had.
I feel like the 90s are probably going, considering the post-World War II era, probably the worst decade of fashion. Close contest. It's a close contest with the early 2000s, don't get me wrong.
No, I don't think so.
I look back at 90s textbooks. Go look at a 90s textbook.
Everything was so much more well constructed, and trench coats actually looked expensive and they were worth.
Yeah, but people's jeans were just hefty and flat.
One of my favorite things to look at if you go on IMDb is find these actors that were popular in the 90s and look at the red carpet photos of them, like the men and the women from the 90s, and then the women all look better now and because they're dressed better, and plus the pictures, because it's the 90s, it's all taken on film, it's got this grain to it that doesn't give it's not as overly focused as the photos are now. But if you watch the X-Files, right, in those early seasons, Mulder looks like he's wearing his dad's suit. in like every episode because they didn't know. And Gillian Anderson kept getting pregnant, so they had to kept putting her in the frumpy coat even more than they already would.
Make it frumpier.
Basically, yeah. Or I was rewatching old pirated episodes of I pirated it years ago, so the statute of limitations has run out, I'm sure, of the show Dark Angel, and they're wearing, it's not just wearing leather, but guys wearing like leather pants that are baggy and like really creased and stupid looking. It's awesome. I would never dress like that, but it's awesome. Oh, shoulder pads, yes, shoulder pads in the suit jacket, or elbow pads if you want to look like.
And they say that Kevin's dad was a generic businessman, which means Chicago Italian mobster.
He doesn't look. McCallister does not come across to me as an Italian name.
What would well, maybe he was a hitman. Maybe that's what he did. Maybe he was a hitman. Like, he's unassuming looking.
I mean, I could see him being part of like an Irish crime family.
See, I think it's more like,
which I think is just the Chicago police.
It's more it's more likely that he worked at some company like, what did we talk about the other day that John Benet Ramsey's dad owned? Access Graphics. He worked in some office park with some company that made computer parts, and it was like a bazillionaire because the company got high evaluation.
Well, that was part of our theory, right?
Yes.
That she is entirely AI generated and wasn't real. The entire thing was a test on the public to see if they could be convinced of AI generated images of people in the 90s.
Kevin McCallister's dad very likely sold his company to Lockheed Martin and retired early. Like,
Kevin McCallister's dad is in fact responsible for most war crimes.
it's likely true. And he raised his kid. Have you ever heard the theory that Kevin McCallister grows up to be Jigsaw from Saw?
No.
Yes. So a lot of people have floated the theory that Kevin McCallister actually ends up growing up to create those traps for adults because he's a sociopath. Anybody who will use micro machines like that, it's not hard to believe.
That paint can flying at you at like 50 miles per hour would have killed someone.
The bar in the second one would have killed both of them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you're not just concussed, you're
dead.
brain instantly starts swelling.
Hitting someone in the face with bricks from the top of a 5-story building.
I was watching this thing about Daniel Stern talking about the spider on his face. A lot of people consider that to be one of the greatest screams in all of Hollywood history. When he gets the spiders. Because all I can think about when I'm like, why are you opening your mouth while that thing's like gross leg is right over your mouth? Why are you doing that? But that scream is that's golden. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Kevin's a little bit of a socio. I mean, the how could he have known that he would be able to get them? Because he gets them to take the shoes off, and then they have to come in through the window, and then they're cut. Like, everything that he did in that movie would be against the Geneva Convention.
Yeah, but the Geneva Convention is for declared wars between armies. This is clearly an insurrection movement between two different terrorist groups.
Very, very reasonable, right?
Exactly.
So I still think Kevin is more than likely was just a little bit of a sociopath.
I think it's very likely that he got a visit from some guys in some suits, and he's now, organizing what we do to terrorists.
Yeah. It's the scene where he's like, I'm sorry. He's clearly trying to manipulate his own mother. He's a sociopath. It's fine.
He got recruited by the CIA.
Very likely true. You know what they say, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. So it's perfect. Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.